Hey badass coders, soon to be coders, and engineer extraordinaires. In today's tutorial, let's create a basic calculator using Python. And we will take Python, create this simple calculator that performs addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and it will take an input from the user and perform the specified operation on the provided numbers. And just a heads up, this project is perfect for beginners who are new to Python programming, and it covers the basics of user input and operations and control flow structures like if, elif statements. And so by the end of the tutorial, you will have a solid understanding of how to create a simple calculator program in Python. And this includes creating your own variables and taking an input from the user. So this is a basic understanding on some basic concepts and requirements for building a calculator. And then we can move on to actually writing the code step by step. And then we run and test our code iteratively as we are building it. Let's get started. Okay, let's open VS Code, and we can start by creating a project directory and a file in here. Let's go ahead and select the icon over here to get started. We can open a folder. This will open up the navigator. Then we can go to our desktop and create a new folder, and we'll call this Python Calculator. And create, select open. And now select the Python Calculator directory here. And you can create a new file by selecting the icon. Let's just name this main.py for now. Select enter. Now you can see the editor here, and then Control-Shift-tilde will give you your terminal down here, and we can check the Python version to make sure that we have Python installed. I'm going to use Python 3, and then actually you want to type in Python 3 and then check the version with -V or double hyphen and lowercase version. And we are in the Python terminal here, or the Python prompt, which you can see with the triple arrows here. So you can get out of that with Control D and then run this Python version check again, -V. You can see we have Python 3.7.4. Okay, so we're gonna create a virtual environment, which just is a container for dependencies and for all of our packages so that it can be contained and modular. So we can run Python 3 -m and then venv for virtual environment, and then the name. So we could call this myvenv with a capital V. Hit enter. This creates the virtual environment. We notice that a virtual environment's been created. Do you want to select it for the workspace? Yes. Okay, so our virtual environment is created, and then from here we want to activate it. So on Mac, you type in source, then the name of the virtual environment /bin/activate, and then hit enter. And then if you're on a PC, you can use the same approach for creating the Python virtual environment, but to activate your virtual environment, you type the virtual environment name, and then /scripts /activate.bat, and then hit enter. Okay. So then from here, I am going to use pip, which is a package manager, and so I'm going to check the version of pip here, and we can do pip -v, and then we get the pip version, which is 19.0.3, so it is installed. And then I always like to run an upgrade on pip, so I'm going to type Python 3 -m pip install, and then upgrade pip. Hit enter. It will upgrade to make sure that it's up to date. And then just make sure that before you're done with your projects or you're closing out that you deactivate, and you can deactivate with the keyword deactivate. So we could deactivate this, hit enter and deactivate, and then you can see down here in terminal that we've left our virtual environment and we are back at the base. So in this case we will reactivate, so I can run source again, myvenv /bin/activate and hit enter, and then you can see over here that we are in fact inside of our virtual environment. Let's get started by testing out our .py file. We will create a function. We use the def keyword for that. Let's name this calculator, and an open and close parenthesis, and then colon, and then hit enter or return to go to the next line. And I always like to create a print statement just to make sure things are working. And then we can come down here and backspace to the beginning of the line and then call our calculator function. And I like to separate with comments, specifically when I'm instructing, so that we can clearly see what's going on. Up here we are declaring a function. Then down here we are calling or using the function. Okay. So then down here we can call this simply by typing in the name of our function, which is right here, and then we use the open and close parenthesis to actually call the function. So from here you can come up and run the py file, and then you should see this string statement print to the console, which we see that down here. Things are working. So congratulations, you created a function and it works. So the above code defines our function with the def keyword, and then we give our function a name, calculator, with the open and close parenthesis, and then the trailing colon, and then the word, and then the code that we want to do something within our function is tabbed in, as you can see here. And so the calculator is just going to prompt the user for an operation and two numbers, and then it performs the selected operation on those numbers and prints the result. So we need a way to take an input from the user, so we use the input function here. We can replace our print statement with input, and then the open and close, and then in our input let's create double quotes, and that indicates a string. You can use single quotes as well. And we type a message in here, please select an operation. And then we want the user to see the operations that they can select: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. I'll create a little space here with a colon. And then the user is going to see this in the console, so I'll hit that, run that script, and then you can see please select an operation, so they're going to see that. And then when the user makes an input, we want to take that value and do something with it. So in order for us to do that, we have to save that value in what we call a variable. So let's call this variable operation, and the variable name is followed by an equal sign, which is the assignment operator. So what we're saying is when whatever happens over here, we're going to have a value here, and this value is going to get stored over here. So it's sort of like reading from right to left in that sense. The value source is from the right side of the equal sign and is stored in the nickname that we give our variable over here. And so in this case, our variable is called operation. So now let's go ahead and print that variable operation to the console down below. So let's come up here, hit play, and then you can see in the console it says please select an operation, and we could select an operation or we could just input anything here, 134WE, and hit enter. And then you can see 134E gets printed to the console. So our variable's working. we're receiving the input, we're storing the input, and then we're printing the input here. Now, what function could we use to take inputs for the separate numbers that we want to take in to run operations on? Well, just like we used before, we could use input again and separate them into their own variables. So this time, instead of typing out the source, we could just type out the variable names for our numbers. So we could say number1 equals, and then wherever that source is. So we're going to take an input once again. And in the input, we could simply say enter first number, then create a space. And then we could just copy this and do the same for our second number, but just make sure to walk through the code from left to right. So in this case, we don't want the same variable number because it won't work. And then enter second number. And then we can run a test on this now and run our Python script. Please select an operation. So let's say we want to add. So I entered the addition operator, I hit enter, enter the first number, 1, enter, plus 2, enter. Okay. And so we didn't receive any errors, so it looks like everything's good. What we could have done was included a print here to make sure that those numbers are captured. We could print the number 1, and we could print the number 2, and run this again. And we can perform this operation by saying plus, and then 1, plus 3. And then you can see that we did pass 1 and 3 as an input. And so our operation, our number 1, our number 2 variable are working just fine. Now, there is a case where someone might want to add or run an operation on a fractional component like a decimal. So to cover those conditions, what we could do is wrap this actually in a float here. So we're converting the input to a float, which will accept a fractional input number. So anytime you have a number with a decimal. And so here, once again, we could print these to make sure we didn't break anything. Run number 1, print, run number 2, then we can add our plus sign, hit enter, our number 2, enter, and then a number 4, enter. And then now you can see we have that fractional component, the point or the decimal with trailing values. Now we're in a situation where we are able to take an input for the values from the user, but now we need to create conditions where we can select certain operations as the user enters them. So we can create conditions using if-else statements, or in Python we call them if or elif statements. And so we could start by creating a simple if statement, and then if this condition is true, so if condition true is how the compiler reads it, then execute this code. And in other languages you will see an open and close bracket here, but not in Python. So it's much simpler. It just goes based off of a tab. So we can create our condition. If this condition is true, you have your colon to end that line for the condition, and then the code we want to execute. So we could say we just want to print the numbers together or added together. So now let's add our condition up here, and our condition could be based on our operation, right? So whatever operation that the user wants or inputs, if that's in this case equal to, let's say the addition operator, then if that's a true statement, then we will print these values added together. So let's give that a try. Run our code. Let's say they select the addition operator, hit enter, and we want to add 5 and then 6, and then sure enough we get the value of 11.0. Now let's write conditions for all the other operations that would follow. And so for the second condition in an if-else statement, we type else if, and then our condition if this operation is equal to subtraction, and then end that line with the colon, and then we go to our print statement here. Then we would take our number 1 and subtract it from our number 2 value that is passed in. And the same would occur for all the other operations until we reach the final operation that is sort of like a catch-all. So it's the place that if none of the other conditions were met, then that final else condition is run. And so that looks something like this. Else, and there's not even a condition because it's just catching everything. And then we could print something like invalid operator. Okay. And then we could run this, enter our subtraction operator, and we want to subtract 4 and 2, and then you can see we have 2 left over here. And I will fast forward and include these other operators, and then you can put them in on your end. Okay, and so here we have all the operators in our conditional statement. So now we can run this, and let's try dividing. So let's say we want to divide and enter. We want to divide 4 divided by 2. 2 goes in twice. So in this tutorial, we looked at creating a basic calculator in Python with some basic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and how to take an input from the user and perform specified operations on the provided numbers. In some future tutorials, we will add some additional functionality to our simple calculator. Thanks for following along, and hit that like button and subscribe, and leave some comments below for me.